And then I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm going to do today, this is going to be the first of several of these sessions that I'm going to do. I'm actually on a weekly basis at the same time, I'm going to start going through the forms. So for example, like next week, I may go through the RPA and just do a tech skills Zoom class on the actual contract documents so to kind of get you up to speed with things. But today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk in June. They gave us 2 new forms and they revised a bunch of forms. And so what I'm going to do, there were probably a dozen, there were 2 new forms, as I said, and then there was a dozen or so revisions. Many of the revisions had to do with property management though. And so I'm not going to review those documents. The only documents I'm going to review with you are the ones that you would commonly be using. So the first one up is this is a new form. Let me close your screens down. Okay, so this is the PVOH form, the PVOH, and it is a new disclosure that is intended, well, let me just read what I said here. It's an advisory to anyone visiting or viewing a property. It advises them of the possibility of being recorded and of various safety risks. The visitor is acknowledging the risk of entry and being advised to take responsibility for their children. So this is a new document. It's optional. It's not something that you must use. It's not something Nicole is going to have on our required document list. But I think it's a good document. I think it's something that answers several problems and addresses several problems. And it sort of sets the tone with potential buyers as well. So you sit down with them, you're ready to go out and show property, you're showing them what you're going to show them. And by the way, we have this advisory that talks about a few things that you should know about. For example, many of these homes that we go into have recording devices, okay? So it's a way for you to have the conversation with them. Now, you may have a style that this doesn't fit with, and that's fine. But it is a good document. CAR felt it was something that would be beneficial, and so they developed it. So it's a brand new form that is available to you, and you can use it at your discretion or not use it if you choose not to. Next up is a new form. So I told you there were 2 new forms. The next one is the square footage and lot size disclosure, the SFLS. And this advisory is related to the possibility that there may be different measurements, believe it or not, for square footage and lot size. There may be 1 square footage on Zillow. There may be a different square footage on the county records. The MLS may be something else. The seller may tell you something else. That's what this form is for, okay? And it recognizes that there may be discrepancies, and it advises the buyer to do their own investigations. Now, you all know that we have our own square footage document that we require be signed. This document replaces that. So this is a more comprehensive, more detailed disclosure. It fits in. It doesn't look different than the rest of the documents that we have the buyers sign. So that's another advantage for it. It can be handled through WinForms. So this is the new document. We're going to continue to accept the existing document for the time being because many of you have deals in process or you've had individuals sign those documents, and that's fine. We'll continue to allow that. But I would recommend that you migrate over to this brand new square footage and lot size disclosure document. So this is a required document. It is something that Nicole will be asking for you to provide. Okay.
Do we have to fill in all the public records, MLS?
No, but you can fill in some sources if you know what they are, if you know that there's a discrepancy, but you don't have to. The disclosure portion of it is the most important part of it. But if you know for a fact that there are discrepancies, then that's where you would do that, Dieter. Okay?
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Okay, good. Okay. This is not a new form. Okay. It was actually originally, it's a fairly new form. Does anybody on the call use this, or do they even know what it is? The
I used it.
DIA, the DIA, what's that? Who was that?
I filled it out for my clients.
Peter, you used it? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Anybody else use it?
Yeah, I've had to use it as a buyer.
Okay, so it's not a required document. Okay, but what this document is, and it was revised, and the language, the revisions had to do with a change in the TDS. Okay, so there's some language. I don't have the page that's going to show you that, but on page 2 of the document, there is some language that was removed regarding the TDS and something that's changed, which I'm going to talk about the TDS at the very end of the meeting. But this advisory is related to sellers completing the necessary disclosures. So it has to do with the TDS and the SBQ. And it gives the seller guidance on how to complete the document. And it should be provided at the time that the disclosures are presented to the seller. This document is optional. Okay, I'm not going to require it for the time being, but I highly recommend that you use it. I recommend that you put it on top of your disclosure packet, so when they complete their transfer disclosure, they can refer to it, because it has very helpful guidelines. It explains to them what they do if they aren't quite sure if they should disclose it or not. It gives them some guidelines. And it explains a lot of the questions that you might have to explain. Okay, and it gives them a written document they can refer to. So again, good solid document, not required. Okay, but I would highly recommend that you consider using it as part of your disclosure package. Comments, questions, remarks? Okay. Okay, the next document that has changed, which you use, oh no, actually this is the next change document, a representative capacity. The RCSD-B allows you to, if there's an assignment, it allows you for a person to be added to as a representative capacity. So you will probably never use this. Okay, if you don't have, if it's unlikely that you're going to do an assignment, a contract, but it is. I'm giving it to you to make you aware that it does exist and that it is a newly revised document. One that you'll use frequently is your residential listing agreement. So the new residential listing agreement on page 1, there were no changes. Okay. Page 2, what they did was they moved around some of the language regarding the MLS. Okay, so they changed some of it. They moved some of it around. We're not going to go into detail, to just be aware that there is some different language in there explaining to buyer what is an MLS, what information is provided to the MLS, and then it goes on to, and there's some language in there that clarifies the MLS benefits and other MLS issues. There's a section added regarding public marketing and its effects on MLS submission, making them aware regarding the clear cooperation policy that we all live under within the MLSs that we operate. And so it explains to them with regard to the public marketing and what those requirements are. And that it also has an advisory regarding coming soon, has also been added to the document. Nothing really material, nothing that I would see that really changes what you do with regard to how you conduct your business, but there's just some additional clarifications there on MLS and how we operate with regard to the clear cooperation policy. Page 2, there is a change where if the seller's instructing when you're going to be doing the start date of the agreement, so when you're going to begin marketing the property, if you are holding it off the market for a period of time, so there's a new addition for that. There's an advisory regarding MLS data on the internet and the seller's ability to opt out of some features of the internet. For example, if they don't want commenting on third-party sites, the contract allows them to opt out of some of those options. There's language added to instructing the broker to present all offers. Believe it or not, in the previous listing agreement, there was no instructions. There was no, I mean, it's just an unwritten rule that we know that all offers are to be presented, but there's actually new language that's been added in stating that the broker must present all offers unless the seller gives written direction to not do so. And then there's also an advisory telling the seller to order HOA documents in advance. So it's when you list the property, you probably should order those homeowner documents, in particular now when we're seeing properties go into escrow so quickly. On the fourth page of the document, there was added language to clarify the broker's use of a key safe lockbox, giving the seller consent to the broker for a broader range of access to authorized individuals that are part of the transaction. So previously there wasn't as good a language giving authority to us to grant access to the property and to the key box to these other entities, home inspectors, termite inspectors. Apparently there were some problems with regard to sellers being upset about individuals gaining access to the property without being authorized. Well, the new listing agreement gives us a much broader, has language in there that gives us a broader scope when we're talking about granting access to third-party individuals that are part of our transaction. And then the fifth page in the listing agreement, no change. Okay, so those are the changes that they added in. Quite a bit on page 2, but really nothing that I would say would be incredibly material. Okay, so really no change in practice for you unless you're going to be doing coming soon. And then that's a whole nother discussion that we need to have, how you're going to be dealing with that. Okay, there's a second revised residential listing agreement, which I'll just recommend that you don't use. We know that we do what are called ER or exclusive right listings, meaning that no matter who sells the property, we get compensated, we get paid, okay? An EA listing, which is an exclusive agency listing, if the seller finds their own buyer, the broker can be excluded from compensation. And that's what this listing agreement is about. So on the unusual instance where you would have a seller insist upon an EA listing, you would use this RLASR document. And there is language on the bottom, and you can see it highlighted there. You probably can't read it, but it says, this is an exclusive agency listing. Seller reserves the right to sell the property directly to a purchaser without any obligation to pay compensation to the broker. And so obviously there creates a vague situation in many instances with EA listings on whether or not we might have been a procuring cause in that. So it's highly recommended that you don't use this listing agreement. And in fact, if you do use it, then you and I need to have a conversation before we actually market the property or before we actually agree to take the listing on the seller's behalf, so we have a clear understanding, okay? And my comment below on it is, this is an EA listing agreement. It incorporates the changes, the RLA, so all the other changes that were in the RLA document I just reviewed with you, with the added language that if the seller brings their own buyer, no compensation is due the broker, okay? Okay, SELM. So this looks like there's a lot. You can see all the red line or the red changes in the SELM document. And there is, but it really has, it's all about, it's clarification regarding the NAR Clear Cooperation Rule that has been adopted by our MLSs. And they eliminated language regarding days on market since the Clear Cooperation Rule renders it moot. So it really, again, there isn't a huge change, but it has a lot of explanatory language about what can and can't be done, what is the mandatory submission requirements, so that the seller understands when they're signing this SELM what can and cannot be done. Okay, we can't just take the listing and it not be put in the MLS. There are some requirements that we have to go through to be in compliance with the clear cooperation. This is a fairly new document. The septic inspection property monument and propane tank. So in some of our outlying areas where we are dealing with septic, so it would be a mandatory document in areas like that. I would recommend that you, well, I don't recommend, I would request that you utilize the document. It resolves the responsibility for septic, well, property monument, and propane inspections and cost allocations. The form was revised to include propane. So if you look at the document there, most of the revisions have to do with propane. Propane was not on the document in the previous version of the document. It also has revised language creating a contingency, that a contingency is created when work is needed to repair a well. So for example, if all contingencies are removed, and let's say, well, I don't know how that would happen, but let's say somehow there was additional disclosure with regard to the well not working properly, or that there being some issue with it, and it's determined that repairs need to be made to the well, that creates an active contingency at that point, which reopens the negotiation. So it's kind of a specialized situation. And I think because water is such a critical factor, that's the reason why they created the safety gate, the safety valve, to be able to reopen the negotiation in the event that a buyer finds out after the fact, after they removed all of the contingencies, that there is an issue with regard to the well. So this is a document that allows you to talk about who's going to inspect it, who's going to be responsible for it, and who's going to be responsible for any repairs.
And Steve, this goes on both sides of transaction. So if you're representing a buyer, you would give this document for review and
Yes.
As much as you would do it on a seller side, right?
Yes, you would, because it's like anything else. For example, you can see here under septic, okay, it talks about pumping, like who's going to be responsible to pay for the pump to be pumped and disposed of. Okay. All these questions that arise, the minute you know you're dealing with septic, the red flag should go up in your mind that, oh, I need to use this document. I need to use this form. Okay. If there's questions regarding what property monuments are talking about, is they're talking about the boundaries. Okay. If there's an issue and your seller wants to have a buyer wants the seller to perform a survey or identify the property monuments, you would utilize this document for that as well. So it's a multi-purpose document. We don't have a lot of homes that are on propane. Okay. We do have quite a few that are on septic. We have a lot that have property monument issues. So it could be used for any one of those items or all of them. Okay.
So we can add it to both templates, the buyer template and
yeah. Most commonly, it's going to come from a buyer, unless the seller is issuing it as some type of a counter offer or additional disclosure. The seller could want to clarify what's going to happen with the septic tank, so there's no confusion. They could issue the document as well.
Hey, Steve, is this a document that's been in use?
Yes, it has been in use for some time without the propane part of it. I don't know when the original version was created. The reason it's being brought to you now is because it's been revised, and so it's been around for a while, Bill. I haven't traced back the origin of the initial document.
Okay, out in Baldwin Lake here in eastern Big Bear, of course, we've got lots of septic and lots of propane and lots of wells.
Should definitely be a part of those transactions for sure.
Good gosh, I've never heard of it before. So thanks for bringing it up here.
You bet. Well, that's probably worth the price of admission for you, Bill. All right, so I think this is my last one, and it's the real estate transfer disclosure statement. This applies to all of us, okay? And you'll notice right here where I'm circling. Can you see where I'm circling? Can you guys see that? Can you see the arrow where I'm circling? You see the 2 inches down where it says coordination with other disclosure forms. Do you see that, section 1?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a third checkbox that's been added. It's the only thing that's been added to the TDS. Okay. And what that third checkbox says is no substituted disclosures for this transfer. And you might say, what's a substituted disclosure? In fact, when I read this the other day and I was looking at the revision, I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know what that is. I have no idea. Like, do I check that? Do I not check that? And so I sent an email to Gov Hutchinson. And I said, Gov, what does that mean? I don't quite understand why did you add that? Why was that added? And what does it mean? And what are we supposed to do with it? And you'll notice that there's an explanation of what substituted disclosures are. And this whole document, the transfer disclosure, can you guys see my arrow when I'm moving it around?
Yes.
Okay. So this whole document it's required by law. Okay. And it needs to be completed, and it's required by law, and the disclosures need to be complete. Now, you could make, technically, under the law, you could make disclosures that satisfy the disclosure requirement without putting it on the TDS. And that's where you would check one of these boxes. So you would check inspection reports completed pursuant to the contract of sale or receipt for deposit. If, for example, there was, you didn't want to put it on the TDS, you could check that box and you could provide those disclosures via another document, okay? Or additional inspection reports and disclosures. So for example, let's say there were foundation issues with the property and you had a geological report done that shows what the problem was and how it had been resolved. And it's much more in depth and much more detailed than what you could do on the TDS. You could check that box and that would be a substituted disclosure. There were lawsuits about TDSs not being complete because those boxes were left blank. Section 1, it was confusing. So they added a third checkbox to say that, because 99.9% of the time, no one provides substituted disclosures. I will say to you, we probably had, out of 1,000 transactions last year, we probably had 3, maybe. Okay, probably didn't even have 3 that had substituted disclosures. So in order to make the document complete, they had to add a box that says no substituted disclosures for this transfer.
So 99% of the time that box should be checked.
The TDS is not complete unless one of those 3 boxes are checked.
Well,
Okay. And this seems ridiculous, but it's law. That's the way it works. And so it's one more thing that Nicole's going to be looking for. And if you utilize the DIA document, it goes into great detail. There's a paragraph that tells the seller why they need to check that box. And so that's, again, why I would recommend that you use the DIA document to help them understand it. That's the only change on the transfer disclosure statement. Okay.
So we didn't check any boxes here because this is kind of a new thing. I asked around the office and nobody says don't check anything there. And the TDS is already signed by the sellers, and I just forwarded it to the buyers.
Yeah. So let me just say this. Okay, we have probably 200 deals in process that have TDSs already either done or completed, that all have this box on it that probably aren't checked. Okay. And that's fine. Okay, we're going to move forward. I'm going to accept the liability on those. We're not going to go back and have everybody sign those. Okay. But for your education, it's going to be something I'm going to talk about in tomorrow's office meeting as well, because we don't have everybody here on the call. but it is something that is going to be a required, not even Nicole knows at this point that is a required area that needs to be addressed. And when I say we check it, we don't check it. Okay, we never check, we never complete anything on these documents. This is the seller. Okay, the seller needs to be aware that if they're not making any substituted disclosures, that box needs to be checked in order to be in compliance with the law and have a complete.
Hey, Steve, got a question about that.
Uh-huh.
Up in the top of the page 1 there, where it says the civil code date as of some date.
Uh-huh.
I've overlooked that several times, and I've corrected it. I've put a date in there as of the writing of the TDS. And Nicole has asked for the seller to re-sign and redate. But the page 3 and all the pages the seller has signed and dated. Is she asking me for that because I altered the original TDS and put an actual date in there? By the way, I've asked her that same question and I haven't got an answer yet.
Sure.
I'm just reading something.
Maybe I should have said over, as in radio speak.
No, you're supposed to put in, you're giving a date that the seller is certifying. So you're giving.
I think, Steve, what he's referring to is page 3 of the TDS. And the reason being at the bottom portion that it's requested that it be re-signed is because the sellers are signing a lot of times ahead of time, and if
they
you
have to
read
sign
it's
after.
acknowledging it.
Yeah, they have to sign at this. The final signature from the seller technically has to come after the buyer has acknowledged
Signed it, right.
And both agents have filled out their portions.
That might be the confusion on the date, but the date that gets filled in that box, Bill, is the date that the disclosure is being made. So it's effective as of that date.
Righto. The date wasn't the question. The question was, do I really need to have the seller sign that again? And I guess the second part of that question would be, would it be just above or just below the existing signature, Nicole?
Yes, you can
usually what most of the agents do is either have them re-sign or re-initial next to their signatures and put a new date next to it.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
It seems to be it's a technicality, Bill, but it's one of those things that it's required so the document is in compliance with the law.
I completely understand. Thanks.
Okay, one last one, the vacant land listing agreement. So all the things that were incorporated in the residential listing agreement, all the changes that were made for the most part are also included in the vacant land listing agreement. So that document was also revised. Clear cooperation also applies to that. So thus all of that language that is in the amended residential listing agreement is also in the vacant land listing agreement. And then that's it. That's the end. Those are the revisions from June. I'm going to start, actually, I know I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I was going to start, let me stop sharing so we can see each other. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is next week, 2 o'clock, same time, I'm going to go with the TDS because we had those questions that Bill had. And I think it would be a good exercise for us to go back through the TDS and explain each section of it and the caveats and the things that you need to be looking for. And then we'll just take each form as we go forward. And when we talk about, like, we'll go into detail more with the residential listing agreement, and I'll sort of walk you through how I explain it to a client, what each paragraph really means, so you can sort of paraphrase. So they don't have to sit there and read every single line of the document.
Steve, I hope the RPA is in the top of the list there too.
It will be, yeah. In fact, I'll do the transfer disclosure. I'll probably do the RPA the week after that.
I was gonna say the buyer's agreement might be good too. Just because we're doing the PEDS and we have all these out of area people coming up.
Right.
So I would love training on
do
that.
a session on the buyer broker to get them to like how to get them to sign it and what does it actually do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We can, so maybe we'll go TDS, buyer broker, and then the RPA after that. The RPA will probably be broken up into a couple weeks or a couple sessions. And then the beauty of this is obviously these documents, if you miss something, you'll have access to be able to go back and take a look at these trainings and these explanations. And these revisions came into play in June. So, and I'm not sure when the next revision will be. It'll be towards the end of the year. I think they do it twice a year. And we'll be more timely with those changes, those revisions. I'll do a session like this that'll explain what those changes are so that when you get the documents and you've received them, you know what you're dealing with as opposed to maybe being a little bit fuzzy with regard to the language. Are there any other questions or comments anybody has? Was this helpful to you?
Very.
Very good. Thank you, Steve.
Excellent. So I'm hoping, yeah, I am still recording. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you for participating. If you want, it'll be posted on the Facebook page, and I'll also email you a link to it so you have access to it if you want to go back and review it, if you missed something, and then we'll also make it available to the other agents.
Keith,
Okay.
question.
Yes.
In regard with 1031 exchange sale, friends of mine from Northern California use the form called CES. Yes. That is used to say that this is a 1031 exchange transaction, right? And I wonder what your thoughts on that.
I'd have to review the document. I don't know what that document is. I'd have to take a look at it, and I could do that. What are the initials? Huge feedback here. Peter, come in and see me on it, and I'll talk to you about it. Okay?
Awesome.
All right, you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good afternoon.
All right.
Thank you, Steve. Have a great day.
See you later.
Nicole, are you still there?